The pen was already uncapped when he set it on the table in front of me. That detail stayed with me afterward. The fact that he had uncapped it before he sat down, he had rehearsed this. He knew how the scene was supposed to go, and in the version he'd planned, I was going to pick up the pen without reading what was underneath it. I didn't pick up the pen. I read the document, and what I found on page 4 of a 6-page financial transfer agreement, on an otherwise unremarkable Wednesday morning in March, with coffee going cold at my elbow and 31 years of marriage sitting between us at the kitchen table, was the answer to a question I hadn't known to ask. The name on the account was not mine. It had never been mine. And the woman who had spent 11 years knowing that was sitting in our guest bedroom at that very moment, waiting to hear that the paperwork was done. But I need to start from before the pen. I need to start from before all of it. Because the particular cruelty of this kind of betrayal is that it hides inside what looks like a life. My name is Ellen. I am 38 years old. I have been married to my husband David since I was 27, which means that for more than a third of my life, the person sitting across from me at the kitchen table was the fixed point I oriented everything else around. That is not a small thing to say. I don't say it carelessly. When you spend 11 years building a life with someone, when you make decisions about where to live and whether to have children and which career to prioritize partly on the basis of what you believe your shared financial future looks like, you are not just trusting a person. You are trusting a structure. You are building a house on a foundation you have not personally inspected because you believed the person beside you when they said the ground was solid. The ground was not solid. But I didn't know that on a bright, cold morning in March when I drove to work with the radio on and stopped for coffee at the place on 5th that I'd been going to for 6 years and sat at my desk in the open plan office of the mid-size engineering firm where I worked as a project coordinator and thought, as I often did that time of year, about the retirement projections David and I had looked at together in January. We were on track, he had said. The combined accounts were in good shape. He had shown me numbers on a laptop screen, his usual practice, a quarterly summary he prepared that I had come to trust the way you trust any document prepared by someone you have no reason to doubt. I had nodded and asked 2 or 3 questions and gone back to whatever I had been doing. That was January. This was March. In between those 2 months, David's mother, Patricia, had come to stay. Patricia had been a presence in our marriage since the beginning, not a destructive one, not in any way that announced itself. She was a compact, careful woman in her mid-60s who had opinions about kitchen organization and strong views on the correct way to fold a fitted sheet, and who treated me with the specific variety of warmth that functions as a perfectly adequate substitute for genuine affection, as long as no one looks too closely. She and David spoke on the phone every Sunday. She visited twice a year, always for exactly 11 days, always bringing a particular brand of coffee cake from the bakery near her home that David loved and that I found slightly too sweet. She called me dear in a way that was not unfriendly and was not warm. I had long since made peace with Patricia. She was not a villain in my understanding of my life. She was a fixed piece of scenery, a minor weather pattern, the mild front system that moved through twice a year and then returned to its point of origin, leaving everything essentially as it had been. When David told me in February that she needed to come stay for a few weeks, something about a plumbing situation at her condo, a repair that would take longer than anticipated, I said of course. I made up the guest room. I restocked the particular coffee she preferred. I was 38 years old and had been managing Patricia's visits for 11 years, and I was good at it, in the competent, automatic way that you become good at managing anything you have sufficient practice with. She arrived on a Tuesday evening with 2 large suitcases and a 3rd bag she carried herself and did not put down until she was in the guest room with the door closed. I noticed this only in the way you notice minor anomalies without registering them as significant, a small blip on a screen you are not watching closely. She had dinner with us and told a long story about her neighbor's dog and went to bed at 9:30, and David and I washed up after dinner the way we always did, and I told him about a project at work, and we went to bed, and I did not think about the bag she'd carried herself until much later. In the first week of her stay, nothing seemed unusual. Patricia helped with dinner twice. She and David watched a program they both liked on Tuesday evenings. She asked me careful, interested questions about my work that I answered in careful, interested ways. And we moved around each other in the house with the practiced ease of people who have established their spatial arrangement over many years. David seemed relaxed, which I registered as a positive sign. Patricia's visits occasionally produced a low-grade tension in him that I had learned to navigate, but which was never particularly pleasant. This time, he seemed, if anything, lighter than usual. I thought it was because he was glad to have her there. I was partially right. The first thing I noticed that I could not rationalize away happened in the third week. I came home on a Thursday evening to find them at the kitchen table with David's laptop open between them. This was not unusual in itself. They sometimes looked at photos together, or David would show his mother something he'd been working on. What was unusual was what happened when I walked in. Not anything dramatic, not a flinch or a slammed lid. Just a micro pause. David's hand moving slightly toward the laptop, a breath held for half a second, and then Patricia saying, "Ellen, dear," in a voice that was perfectly normal, except that it was deployed about 1 second faster than the situation required, as if to fill space that might otherwise have been conspicuous. David turned the laptop so the screen faced more toward him and said, "How was your day?" And I said fine, and set my bag down and went to change my shoes. In our bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the carpet. I was a project coordinator. I spent my days managing overlapping timelines and identifying the points where systems failed to align. I was professionally trained to notice when something didn't fit the pattern and trace it back to its source. I sat on the edge of the bed and replicated the scene I'd just walked into and identified, with reasonable precision, that I had interrupted something rather than simply walked into something. I told myself I was projecting. I changed my shoes. I went back to the kitchen and made dinner, while David closed the laptop and Patricia set the table, and we had a normal evening, and I went to bed and lay awake until 1 in the morning, running through the financials in my head. The quarterly summary, the numbers on the screen, the accounts as I understood them. By morning, I had a list of questions I didn't know how to ask. I spent the next 2 weeks answering them myself. I had access to our joint checking account and our joint savings account. I had never had cause to look beyond them with any particular scrutiny. David managed the investment portfolio, the retirement planning, the longer-term financial architecture of our life together. Because he had a background in finance, and because this was an arrangement we had settled into early in our marriage and which had always seemed reasonable. I handled the day-to-day, the bills, the groceries, the household accounts. He handled the strategy. This had not seemed like a vulnerability. It had seemed like sensible division of labor between two people who trusted each other. I started with the documents I had access to, tax returns, filed jointly, going back 7 years. I kept them in a folder in the filing cabinet in my home office, organized by year. I spread them on my desk on a Friday evening when David had taken Patricia to dinner, telling them I had a headache, which was not entirely untrue. What I found in the tax returns was not, in itself, alarming. David reported investment income each year, modest amounts, consistent with what he'd described in the quarterly summaries. The accounts were listed correctly. The numbers aligned with what I knew. What I found, on line 32B of our return from 3 years ago, was a reference to a financial institution I didn't recognize. Just the name and a routing number, associated with a small reported dividend. The amount was unremarkable, $847. I might have looked at it 100 times and never questioned it. I questioned it now. The institution's name was Meridian Trust Services. I opened my laptop and looked up Meridian Trust Services. It was a private trust company based in Delaware, specializing in retirement and estate planning. Their website was professionally designed and said very little of substance, which is its own kind of information. I looked at the tax returns for the other years. Meridian Trust Services appeared in 6 of the 7, always small reported dividends, always modest enough to be unremarkable. I looked at the year it first appeared, 7 years ago. I had been married to David for 11 years, so the account at Meridian Trust Services had been opened 4 years into our marriage. I sat with that for a long time. I did not have a login for Meridian Trust Services. I had no account number, no statement, no record of a contribution. I searched our joint email, which David and I both had access to through a shared family account, and found nothing with Meridian's name in it. Either David used a separate email for correspondence with them, or he received paper statements. Given his preference for paper records, which I knew well, I thought it was likely the latter. Paper statements would come to the house. I thought about how our mail worked. David usually got the mail. He worked from home 3 days a week, and it had become his habit, the way these small domestic arrangements do. I received the mail when I got home first, which happened less often. I thought about whether I had ever seen an envelope from Meridian Trust Services. I didn't think I had. I thought about where David kept his paper records. He had a filing cabinet in his home office, which was also my home office. We shared the room, each with our own desk on opposite walls. His filing cabinet was the one on the left side of the room. I had never gone through it. I had never had a reason to. It was his space in the shared room, the same way his side of the closet was his side of the closet, a boundary observed without being stated. I opened it on a Saturday morning while he and Patricia were at the farmer's market. I had said I wanted to sleep in. I had not slept. The filing cabinet had 4 drawers. The top drawer was general correspondence and tax-related documents, a mirror of my own, nothing surprising. The second drawer was investment account documents, and I went through this carefully. The accounts it contained were the ones I knew about, which didn't reassure me as much as it might have, because absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The third drawer was older documents, warranties, insurance policies, things from before our marriage, and the fourth drawer at the bottom was personal records, old pay stubs, some documents from his time in grad school, and at the very back, behind a manila folder labeled miscellaneous, a smaller expandable folder bound with a rubber band. The expandable folder contained statements from Meridian Trust Services. There were 41 of them. Quarterly statements going back to the account's opening date, which was confirmed now as 8 years, 4 months, and 22 days into our marriage. Not 4 years, 8. The discrepancy from the tax return must have been a year I'd miscounted, or a year the dividend had been filed differently. I sat on the floor of the home office with the statements spread around me and worked through them in order. The account had been opened with an initial deposit of $45,000. I did not know where $45,000 had come from 8 years ago. Contributions had been made every quarter since, varying amounts, some small, some larger. The balance at the most recent statement, dated 8 weeks ago, was $312,488. The account holder of record was David Allen Marlowe. The designated co-signer and secondary beneficiary was Patricia Ann Marlowe. His mother, not his wife, not me. His mother, who had been the secondary beneficiary on a $312,000 account for the entirety of its existence, who was currently staying in my guest bedroom because of a plumbing issue that I was now reconsidering in its entirety. I put the statements back in the expandable folder. I put the folder back behind the miscellaneous folder in the fourth drawer. I closed the filing cabinet. I went to the bathroom and ran cold water over my wrists for about 90 seconds, which is a thing I do when I need my hands to stop shaking and my thoughts to stop blurring. It works. It worked now. Then I went downstairs and started a pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen table and waited for them to come home. They came in laughing about something. A dog they'd seen at the market, some kind of doodle mix that had gotten into a flower display. David was carrying a paper bag, and Patricia had a small bunch of tulips she'd apparently bought on impulse, and they were both pink-cheeked from the cold and entirely comfortable. And I watched them come through the door and thought about the folder in the fourth drawer, and the name that was not mine. "Coffee's ready," I said. "You're up," David said, slightly surprised. I had told him I was sleeping in. "How are you feeling?" "Better," I said. I poured 3 cups, and we sat at the kitchen table, and I listened to them finish the story about the dog, and I asked questions in the right places, and I watched my husband's face for signs of what I now knew, and found nothing that would have registered as anything other than a pleasant Saturday morning if I hadn't been looking for it. I was very good at appearing to be at rest while thinking at high speed. I had not known this about myself before. I discovered it that morning. I had decided, in the 90 seconds over the cold water, that I was not going to say anything yet. I was not going to confront, not going to ask, not going to give either of them any signal that something had changed. Because the thing about confronting a deception before you understand its full shape is that you reveal what you know before you know everything, and then the story gets managed before you can see it clearly. I was a project coordinator. I had learned this about complex problems. Do not intervene at the point of discovery. Map the full system first, then intervene at the load-bearing point. I needed to know two things. Where had the $45,000 come from? And what was Patricia doing here, now, with a bag she'd carried herself and kept in her room? I spent the next 6 days finding out. The $45,000 turned out to be traceable through our joint savings account, which I now examined with the specific retrospective attention of someone looking for something they had previously had no reason to look for. 8 years and 7 months ago, our joint savings account showed a withdrawal of $45,000. The memo field, which David filled in manually for transfers, said, "Home repair reserve, water damage." I remembered the water damage. A pipe had burst in the basement. The repair had been significant. I had written a large check to a plumbing contractor, but I had also, I now recalled, wondered at the time why the savings account looked smaller than I'd expected after the repair was done. David had explained that the contractor had charged more than the estimate, plus we'd had to replace some flooring. I had accepted this. There had been invoices. I had seen them. I looked for those invoices now, in my own files. I found them. The total on the invoices was $28,700, not $45,000. The difference was $16,300. $16,300 plus $28,700 equaled $45,000. The initial deposit to Meridian Trust Services matched to the dollar. I sat with this for a long time. The water damage had been real. The repair had been real. The invoices had been real. And inside a legitimate household emergency, $16,300 had been redirected to an account his wife didn't know existed. I thought about the quarterly contributions since then. The amounts had varied, but over 8 years they added up. I thought about the years I had trusted the quarterly summaries on the laptop screen. I thought about what a summary can show you and what it can leave out. I thought about Patricia in the guest room. I had looked, on the third day after finding the statements, at the guest room while Patricia was out with David. I had not opened drawers or gone through her belongings. But the bag she'd carried herself, the one she'd kept close until the bedroom door was closed, it was on the top shelf of the guest room closet, in plain sight once you opened the closet door. It was a soft-sided document bag, the kind with a zipper and a combination lock. The lock was set. I did not touch it. On the 5th day, while Patricia napped and David was on a call, I called a friend of mine named Susanna, who worked as a paralegal at a family law firm 2 cities over. I told Susanna, in broad terms, what I had found and what I suspected. I asked her what I should do before I said anything to David. Susanna was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You need a financial forensic accountant, and you need a family law attorney, in that order, before you say a single word to your husband. And you need them somewhere he won't recognize the name." "How long will that take?" "If you call today, you could have preliminary assessments by the end of next week." "I have a feeling there's a timeline I don't know about," I said. "Then you call today," Susanna said. "And Ellen, don't let him know you're looking." I called that afternoon from my car, parked 3 blocks from the house. The attorney Susanna recommended was named Catherine Voss. Her office was in a city 40 minutes south, in a building that looked like a dentist's office from the outside and felt like a library from the inside. Quiet, orderly, with the specific calm of a place where complicated things are handled without drama. Catherine Voss was in her early 50s, with an unhurried manner, and the kind of directness that doesn't feel aggressive because it's not personal. It's simply clear. She shook my hand and offered me water, and sat down across from me and said, "Tell me what you know." I told her what I knew. I had made notes, specific account names, dates, amounts, the memo field on the savings account withdrawal, the number of statements I'd found, and the balance on the most recent one. Catherine Voss listened without interrupting and made her own notes in a small, clean handwriting. When I finished, she set down her pen. "Before I tell you what I think," she said, "I want to ask you about timing. You said his mother arrived 3 weeks ago. Has your husband mentioned any upcoming financial decisions or documents that need your signature?" Something moved through me. "No," I said. "Not yet." "Has he mentioned anything about the retirement accounts? A restructuring? A transfer? Any changes to beneficiary designations?" "No." She nodded slowly. "The reason I ask is that the presence of the mother, a document bag with a combination lock, and an account your husband has been maintaining separately for 8 years. Those things together suggest to me that there may be a planned transaction that requires your involvement. A spousal signature, possibly, a beneficiary change, or a transfer of funds that touches a jointly held asset." She looked at me steadily. "If that's what this is, then the timing of the mother's visit is not coincidental. She is here to witness something or to receive something. And the reason you haven't been told about it yet is that you haven't been asked to sign anything yet." I thought about the uncapped pen. I didn't know about it yet. That was still 10 days away. But something in what she said landed like a key turning in a lock. "What do I do?" I said. "You let us document everything first," Catherine Voss said. "Forensic accounting on the Meridian account and any others we can identify. A full picture of the marital assets versus what's been held separately. We do that quietly, before any document is put in front of you. And then," she paused, "then you wait for him to ask you to sign. And when he does, you read every page," she said simply. "And then you call me." The forensic accountant Catherine Voss worked with was a small firm called Prentice & Associates, and the lead accountant assigned to my case was a man named Owen Prentice, who communicated exclusively in email, worked extraordinarily fast, and had the gift of explaining complex financial structures in language that did not condescend. He spent 8 days reviewing what I gave him: the tax returns, the statements I had photographed with my phone, the savings account records I'd obtained through our joint online banking portal. At the end of 8 days, he sent me a 12-page report. The Meridian account was the main structure, but not the only one. Owen Prentice had identified, through cross-referencing the tax returns against what was reportable under our joint filing, 2 additional accounts he couldn't reconcile: a brokerage account opened 6 years ago and a smaller savings vehicle from 4 years back. Neither was in my name. Neither appeared in the quarterly summaries David had shown me. Together, the 3 accounts held a combined balance of approximately $478,000. The contributions to these accounts, traced back through the available records, were sourced from a combination of redirected joint savings, the $45,000 initial deposit, and at least 2 other large transfers I now recognized. Unreported bonus income from David's employer that had not been included in our joint tax filings. And, in 2 cases, transfers from an account I had not previously known existed at all. An account opened in David's name before our marriage, which Owen Prentice had identified through a reference in an older tax document, and which appeared never to have been disclosed in our marital financial discussions. The total picture, as Owen Prentice summarized it at the bottom of page 12, was this: over the course of our 11-year marriage, my husband had maintained a parallel financial structure representing approximately $478,000 in assets that were not reflected in the marital estate as I understood it. The secondary beneficiary on all 3 accounts was Patricia Ann Marlowe. There was no document in which I had consented to any of this, no record of disclosure, and no indication in any of our joint financial records that these assets existed. I read the report on a Sunday morning in my car in the parking lot of a coffee shop 2 miles from home. I had told David I was meeting Susanna. I was not meeting Susanna. I sat in my car for 45 minutes reading 12 pages, and then I called Catherine Voss and told her I had the report. "Is it as significant as you expected?" she asked. "More," I said. "Then we're ready," she said. "Whenever he puts the document in front of you." 4 days later, he put the document in front of me. The morning of the pen, I woke at 6. David was still asleep. I lay in the gray light and ran through the shape of what I knew. The accounts, the balances, the beneficiary designations, Catherine Voss's instructions. Read every page, then call me. I had not slept well in 10 days, but I had slept. I had gone to work each day and been competent and reliable, and I had come home each evening and eaten dinner with my husband and his mother, and been, I thought, entirely normal. I was proud of this in a way that surprised me. Not pride exactly, but something like the satisfaction of a technical problem executed cleanly. Patricia was up when I came downstairs, which was unusual. She normally didn't appear before 8:30. She was at the counter making coffee with a specific efficiency that suggested she had also not slept particularly well, or had slept well because she knew what today was. She said, "Good morning, dear," without turning around, and I said good morning and poured myself a glass of water and sat down at the kitchen table. David came down 20 minutes later. He was dressed, which was also unusual for a Wednesday morning when he worked from home. He had a folder in his hand. "I wanted to catch you before work," he said, and sat down across from me. He placed the folder on the table and opened it with a movement that he had clearly practiced. Not overly theatrical, not fumbling, just smooth and inevitable. He took out 6 pages, clipped at the top left corner. He turned them so they faced me. He uncapped the pen and set it on the table beside the pages. "I've been meaning to talk to you about updating some of our beneficiary designations," he said. His voice was calm, the voice of a man discussing an administrative matter. "Standard stuff, making sure everything is current. I've been working on it with a financial planner. This is the transfer document and the updated beneficiary form for the retirement accounts." He paused. "It should only take a minute." I looked at the document. I looked at the uncapped pen. "Of course," I said. "Let me just read through it." Something moved across his face. Not alarm, not yet. A slight recalibration, the micro-expression of someone whose script has deviated slightly from the anticipated line. "It's pretty standard," he said. "Mostly boilerplate." "I know," I said pleasantly. "I just like to read what I'm signing." I read the document. I read all 6 pages. Page 1 was a cover sheet describing the transfer as an administrative update to existing retirement beneficiary designations. Page 2 was a consent form for the joint marital savings account, authorizing a transfer of $87,000 to an account identified only by routing number, which I recognized because I had spent 10 days memorizing details as the routing number for Meridian Trust Services. Page 3 was the beneficiary update form for our joint 401k, which currently listed me as primary beneficiary. The update proposed removing my name and replacing it with Patricia Ann Marlowe. Page 4 contained 3 additional authorization clauses in smaller type, the third of which granted David sole signing authority over 2 accounts I had not seen in any prior document, and which matched, in account structure, 2 of the 3 accounts Owen Prentice had identified. Pages 5 and 6 were signature pages. I read to the bottom of page 6. I set the pages down on the table. I looked at my husband across the kitchen table where we had eaten breakfast together for 11 years. "I need a few minutes," I said. "I'm going to take this into my office." His jaw tightened very slightly. "It's really straightforward, Ellen." "I know," I said. "I just want to make sure I understand it." I picked up the document. I did not pick up the pen. I went upstairs to my home office and closed the door, and I sat at my desk and called Catherine Voss. She picked up on the second ring. "Is this it?" "Yes," I said. "Page 2 transfers $87,000 from our joint savings to Meridian. Page 3 removes me as primary beneficiary from the 401k and replaces me with his mother. Page 4 has authorization clauses for 2 additional accounts. A brief pause. Okay, she said. Don't sign anything. Come down and tell him you want to review it with your financial advisor before signing. That's a completely reasonable request. Do not discuss specifics. Then call me from your car. All right. Ellen. A pause. You did everything right. I went back downstairs. David was at the kitchen counter, his back to me. Patricia was not in the room. I came to stand at the end of the table and placed the document back on it, still not signed. I'd like to take this to my financial advisor before I sign, I said, just to have a second set of eyes. He turned around. In 11 years of marriage, I had seen my husband navigate many situations, and I knew the geography of his expressions with some precision. What I saw now was not quite what I had expected, not guilt, which would have been manageable, and not calculation, which I had prepared for. What I saw, for one unguarded second, was something that looked very much like relief. The specific relief of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has, at last, put it down. As if some part of him had wanted me to look, had been waiting for me to look, had been tired for years of maintaining the weight of something he had built and could not now dismantle without help. I don't know what to do with that. I have thought about it many times since. I don't know what it means about what he wanted, or what he was afraid of, or what he imagined would happen if I simply signed the document and the $87,000 and the 401k beneficiary designation moved through without comment. I don't know if he had thought that far ahead, or if the thinking had stopped at the construction of the structure, and he had simply kept maintaining it year after year without examining what it was for. I do know that the relief lasted approximately 1 second. Then something else replaced it. A flatness, a reassembly of composure. And he said, "Of course, that makes sense." Patricia appeared in the doorway from the hallway. She had her coat on. She had her bag, the one with the combination lock. She looked at the unsigned document on the table, and then at David, and then at me, and her expression was perfectly composed and told me absolutely nothing except that she had been standing on the other side of the door for at least part of this conversation. "I'll get out of your way," she said pleasantly. "I was going to take a walk." "Take your time," I said. She went out the front door. David and I stood in the kitchen in the silence she left behind. "I'll call you when I've spoken to the advisor," I said. "Ellen." "I'll call you," I said, and picked up my bag and my keys and went to my car. I sat in the car in the driveway and called Catherine Voss and told her what had happened, and she said she would file for an emergency freeze on the joint marital assets that afternoon. I drove to her office. I sat in the quiet room with the bookshelves in order and the notepad with the neat line at the top, and I went through everything with her and Owen Prentice, who came in at noon, and we built the picture that was already substantially built. The 3 accounts, the $478,000, the beneficiary designations, the $45,000 initial deposit traced back to the joint savings account, the bonus income redirected over 8 years. "What do you want?" Catherine Voss asked me, in the same tone she used for everything. Not soft, not hard, just direct. "I want what's mine," I said. "What's legally mine from a marital estate that includes what he's been keeping separate." "That's straightforward then," she said. "In this state, assets accumulated during the marriage are marital property, regardless of whose name they're held in. The structure he built doesn't protect those assets from a dissolution. He may not have understood that, or he may have been planning to move them to Patricia before any legal process began, which is what the document you didn't sign was for." "The timing," I said. "Patricia arriving, the document." "We'll demonstrate the timeline," she said. "The account openings, the contributions, Patricia as beneficiary. All of it goes into the discovery process. Her presence here adds context." She looked at me steadily. "This is going to be uncomfortable." "It's already uncomfortable," I said. "Yes," she said. "But it's going to get formal uncomfortable. depositions, disclosure requirements. He'll have to account for every transfer. I thought about David's face when I'd said I wanted to take the document to my advisor. That 1 second of something that looked like relief. I think part of him knew this was coming, I said. Catherine Voss looked at me with the kind of expression that carries professional assessment and personal recognition in equal measure. They usually do, she said. What followed was not fast or clean. These things never are. The legal process moved on its own timeline, with its own requirements, and I lived inside it for 7 months the way you live inside any significant upheaval. One day at a time, managing what could be managed, letting the rest move at the pace it moved. David retained an attorney. His attorney requested discovery. Catherine Voss and Owen Prentice provided discovery. 11 years of financial records, the full documentation of the Meridian account and the 2 additional accounts, the traced transfers, the tax filings. David's attorney attempted, in the early stages, to characterize the parallel accounts as a retirement planning approach that had not been communicated clearly, a framing that collapsed fairly quickly in the face of Owen Prentice's documentation, which was, as Catherine Voss put it, difficult to argue with because it was simply math. Patricia returned to her condo 3 days after the morning of the pen. The plumbing issue apparently had been resolved. I did not see her again until a mediation session in the fall, where she sat on the other side of a conference table and looked at a point slightly above my head for the entirety of the 3-hour session. The document bag with the combination lock was not present. There was a deposition. There were several rounds of negotiation. The settlement, reached in October and finalized in November, was structured as a division of the full marital estate, including the previously undisclosed accounts, weighted to account for 8 years of redirected marital income. The number was, as Catherine Voss had predicted early on, significant. It was not everything I had lost, not the years of misplaced trust, not the compounded interest of all those quarterly summaries I had believed because I had no reason not to. But it was what was legally mine. And it was mine, specifically, because I had not picked up the pen. I moved into a new apartment in December. It was smaller than the house, with windows that faced east and got the full morning light. I had never lived anywhere that got the full morning light. Our house had faced west, and I had lived most of my adult life in afternoons. I woke up the first morning in the new apartment to sun on the wall and lay there for a while taking the measure of it. I had brought my own filing cabinet. It was a small 2-drawer in gray steel, unremarkable, except that I had organized it myself, from scratch, with no one else's categories or folders, only mine. The documents in it were mine. The financial accounts reflected in those documents were in my name. I had sat with Catherine Voss and Owen Prentice for an afternoon in December and understood, for the first time in 11 years, the complete picture of my own financial life. Every account, every amount, every institution and routing number and beneficiary designation. My name on all of it. Susanna came over the first weekend. We ordered pizza and sat on the floor because I hadn't bought furniture yet, and she told me about a complicated case at her firm, and I told her about the new project I'd been assigned at work, a residential development, 12 units, specific and detailed, requiring the kind of attention to load-bearing structure that I had spent the last year thinking about in a different register entirely. We talked until it was late and the pizza was gone, and after she left, I sat in the empty apartment in the good quiet and thought about systems, about what holds and what doesn't, about the difference between a structure that looks sound and a structure that is. My mother called that Sunday morning. She didn't know the specifics, only that David and I had separated, that it had been complicated, that I was in a new place. She asked how I was doing, in the careful way of a mother who wants the truth but will accept what she's given. "I'm okay," I said. "Really?" I looked at the east-facing windows. The morning light was specific and unambiguous. It did not ask permission. "Really?" I said. "I know where everything is now. That's a better feeling than I expected." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your grandmother used to say, Know your numbers, and you know your life. She was right, I said. After we hung up, I made coffee. I drank it in the morning light, standing at the window, looking at a city that was entirely mine to navigate without a map drawn by someone else. The coffee was the right temperature. The light was very clean. I thought, I almost signed that paper. And then I didn't.